Has Gary Lineker met his match? Welcome to Mark and Pete. Here's a thought.
If match of the day has no moments to match, then there's nothing to say or coverage to catch. With political footballs in play and the pitch has a patch, there are furious fans in dismay and lots of heads to scratch. Well, it seems that Gary Lineker has once again got himself into trouble, but this is down to the fact that he claims that he'll keep speaking up for people with no voice after the criticism of his Twitter tweets, that's right, on the government's asylum policy. Now, the Match of the Day host said that the language setting out of the government's plan was not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 1930s. Now, Home Secretary Suella Braverman said that she was disappointed by the remarks. Unfortunately, that Gary Lineker and many of his colleagues have decided to step back. And of course, for those interested in soccer, well, he's no longer the presenter at this moment. Now, the ex-BBC head, this is Greg Dyke, has said that the broadcaster, the BBC, has in fact undermined its own credibility by taking Gary Lineker off the air. Well, I ask you, Clergyman Pete, has Gary Lineker burned his bridges?
Well, I hope so, in that I think it is important that the BBC takes a stand here. I'm all for freedom of speech, but I'm also for fairness. And I've been following how the BBC has treated its employees, its presenters, its public-facing employees, with regards to use of social media for political comment, and they're not allowed to do it. And yet Gary Lineker has been getting away with it, and he's now taking it a step too far. And it's just wrong that he should be allowed to get away with it, because the BBC, I think he's very popular. Now, as regular listeners will know, I'm not a fan of football and know very little about it, especially association football, soccer. And that's what we're talking about. He's a commentator on that. He was a famous footballer, but he seems rather smug and self-congratulatory and annoying. And he is not a very good presenter. He's unprofessional. He ums and ahs just a little bit too much to be regarded as professional. He doesn't have seemingly much of a sense of humor. He's not very witty in his comments, and he comes across when he's reading a teleprompter as though he's reading a teleprompter. So all round, he's not very professional. And then he's making silly political comments, and he's paid, I believe, £1.2 million a year. It seems that he should get his comeuppance for this, I think.
Well, here's my take on it, and I agree with you that any individual who represents an organisation, in this particular case the BBC, should be, particularly on a flagship show, and that's not easy to say, like Match of the Day, is somebody who's an ambassador for that institute. And it would make sense that if you follow a particular cause, where it actually makes sense is making comments about the subject matter, i.e. football. So we know that Gary has tweeted about performance of managers, players, and even clubs overall. And some of them have, again, also got him into hot water about what he should say and what he should not say. But in this particular case, I do agree with you. I think he's crossed the line. And in many ways, whilst absolutely it is right that, some individuals should be concerned about the migrant situation and the fact the government needs to tackle it. But the question is he the right person? And to your point, he's paid a lot of money for representing the BBC. And what this has done, in my opinion, and this is I'm coming from a different perspective, which is about the brand BBC, as well as, ironically, the brand Gary Lineker, because, you have to sort of bear that in mind too. Reputation is key here. Yeah. This has escalated beyond a simple tweet. How many times have we seen this happen where something goes out into the public on this platform and it just escalates way beyond where I think it should be? Well, it should have been quashed a lot longer. In my opinion, it should have perhaps been a discussion behind the scenes and then moved on. Now, obviously, if the culprit, in this case, if it were to have been Gary, as it is, continued with this type of dialogue, then perhaps it could have been managed in a more severe way. But to me, what this has now done is it's put the BBC's judgment into question, not just Gary Lineker's.
Well, I think them removing him from the show was the wise thing to do, because they're in that position. Otherwise, would be in the position of defending his tweet, because he's defending it.
Yes,
he's stood by it.
I think they had no choice. I agree with you. Yeah.
But they put themselves in that position, in that he should have been removed from his job a lot earlier when he refused to stop political tweeting, because he's been doing it the whole time. Now,
I agree. Yes,
and we both disagree with a lot of his political views. That's not the problem. The problem is that he's bound by a contract to BBC, which espouses impartiality, or claims to be impartial. We know that they're not. And I mean, why were they called the BBC? Because they're the biased broadcasting operation. Everyone knows that. Yeah. But the problem that I have with it is not that people shouldn't be allowed to have those views. Of course they should. We should have a range of different views, and they should be heard. And although I think he, from his views, shows a bit of ignorance of the subject, that doesn't mean that he doesn't have the right to say them. And indeed, if the BBC had said, well, we encourage all our employees to just use social media as they see fit, because we want to encourage public debate, that also would be different. So I think that the problem really is that the BBC made it clear that they were forbidding the political tweeting and use of other social media, putting out political comment by its employees, and then allowed him to do it. Yeah. And they, of course, are claiming impartiality. Allowing him to do it, would they allow right-wing or anti-immigration comments to go unchecked? I think not, at least that is the impression given, because he's the one being allowed to get rid of it, get away with it so publicly. So yeah, they needed to stop him, and I think he does need to suffer some consequences for this. I don't want to see the end of his career, as it made clear earlier. I don't like him. I don't know him personally, so that it's not a comment about him in his private life, but in his public persona, I don't really like him, and he's part of a genre of TV that I don't watch anyway. So it doesn't really affect me much. I don't want him to lose out his job, but I think he needs to have serious consequences for this. Maybe lose this particular gig.
Yeah, well,
this particular presenter.
I'll come from a slightly different perspective, because I do know a little bit more about the soccer game. Yeah. So, Gary Lineker has hosted Match of the Day since 1999. So he's been in the chair, should we say, the hot seat, for quite some time. What I would say is this, is that certainly from my experience, he and his co-presenters and those who are analysts of the game bring a dimension which I think is of value to most viewers. Now, this is all very subjective, of course, but I will say that former footballers commentating on the game today certainly gives a lot of credible analysis, understanding of what's going on in the game. When it comes to him as an individual, I think that maybe there's something else behind this. His contract will be coming to an end soon. And I know that Brand Lineker, where does he go from here? Which actually is this point about the broader story about if you do break relationships, if you become controversial, this is an individual who is a highly experienced broadcaster now. You've been in the game for well over 20 years as a broadcaster, let alone in the public eye for many, many decades as a soccer player. You get to know how things work. And I wonder whether that many, many points here is that through what the BBC needs to do here, the reevaluation of a flagship show is, in my opinion, really important to make sure they don't lose it. Herein lies a lesson. We've seen that with, Top Gear, where again they've sort of lost their way in some ways, where they've had fallouts with their lead presenters, as we've seen.
Yes.
And much of the day, without any doubt, having really nearly 60 years being on our TVs, without whether you like football or not, have to recognize is an extremely popular show. And so for me, anyone who fronts the show, anyone who's part of the show, needs to hold the integrity of this and try and get away from watering down what it is. It is a sporting show, and keep the comments to that. And I think otherwise what will happen is if you do burn the bridges, if you break the relationships, you lose the trust with the audience. Because when if he does go back into the chair, I sort of start to keep thinking about his comments about the Germany in 1930s comments, and I start to think, what is he going to say next? And that's the bit that I think about, which is about the credibility of the individual.
I want to make a point as we draw to a close. I want to make a point. Then I'll ask you a question of another possibility of his motivation for doing it. See what you think of it.
Yeah.
The first point I want to make is perhaps they should just change the name of the show to Tweet of the Day. I think that might,
well, there you go.
But the question I was going to ask is, do you think he has his eyes on a political career? Is the move to try and cement himself in people's eyes as a progressive and a supporter of refugees, and he's looking to the end of a contract and moving on?
He wouldn't be the first. Gary Neville, who was a former England player, of course, played for a number of clubs, but most famously, of course, Manchester United, recently blurted out political comments live on air last year. And of course, this caused lots of controversy. And as we very well know, he was going down a political path. Whether that continues is to be seen. Now, I don't know. I mean, who can say? What I do think is elevating his brand elsewhere, maybe there is another program that potentially he's
could
got
be
his
a
eyes
political
on.
show.
He could, whether it's politics, whether it's sport, whether it's something else. We know that Jeremy Clarkson, for example, I alluded to the Top Gear program, has gone on to greater things, having left the BBC. Now, Gary is not, unfamiliar with that trend. It could be that we're seeing a similar path. Who knows? Time will tell. But I just feel that for me, as a football fan, I don't like to see presenters like this do it. I think it dilutes the program and the brand, and I do now sort of see him in a different light. And so, how does he move on? And maybe now is that time, having been in the chair for such a long time. Maybe we just need to freshen it up and bring new perspectives.
And before we close, here's a final comment from Mark.
If you decide to speak out of turn and cross people that you spurn, the lesson that you'll quickly learn, you'll fall from bridges that you burn.